Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be an orchid care guide for the summer, and my gosh, yesterday it was like 90 degrees here. It was very hot, and this time of year I don't even make videos in that grow room anymore because it's just too hot. I don't air condition that room. I have a lot of warm to hot growers, so my orchids aren't too affected by it. In fact, they actually like the heat a lot. A lot of orchids are in spike and in bud, and it's the season where I start seeing a lot of my cattleyas in bloom, a lot of my dendrobiums in bloom. But anyhow, let's jump right into it and talk about how to care for your orchids in the summer. Okay, so the first thing is more light. So if you grow on windowsills, which you could check out my last video right here, you're gonna get more light. So the sun starts coming up like, wow, like at 5 in the morning. So in New York, at least, the further up you are, the more light you're gonna get this time of year. And then the sun starts going down like 8:30 around there. So you're gonna get a lot more light. So if you're growing on windowsills, it's wonderful for your orchids. With that said, sometimes the intensity of the light can be a little harsh. So you may wanna move your orchids away from the windowsills a little bit. If you are growing under grow lights like I do, I like to increase the grow lights by another hour. So in the winter, I do 12 hours, in the spring 13, in the summer 14 hours. So I will increase by 1 hour. And the reason for that is that there's some species that only bloom in the wild when they get a different day-night differential. If you obviously live by the equator, you're getting the same day and night, and you're gonna get very little variation. But some of the orchids are a little bit north and south of the equator, and they do get triggered by that. So I like to mimic that with the grow lights at home. And that's more for species orchids. Temperatures are gonna be a lot hotter. Like I said, I don't air condition the room where I grow the orchids. But it's hot in there. I have a lot of warm to hot growers mostly. I have some intermediate growers, but not that many. So if you don't have central AC, you're gonna have to water more often because with the heat, things are gonna dry out a lot faster. You wanna be careful with anything on a window with hot sun, with direct light, because it can scorch the leaves a little bit more. The sun is gonna be stronger, so just be mindful of that. And any new orchids that you're getting, let's say you have like a strong, let's say you have a window with intense light, you wanna acclimate it, especially like a seedling. You don't wanna put it right away into the windowsill. You start a little bit further away, and then you could acclimate it and get it closer. Speaking of seedlings, this time of year, it's a great time to get new orchids. A lot of things are starting to grow actively. A lot of roots are coming out. So it's a good time to get something to adapt to your conditions, because you could repot it and it won't skip a beat. But with that said, when we are in the summer and say there's a heat wave, you want to avoid ordering something, because if it's too hot, it could stress the orchid out. So just pay attention to how the temperatures are between the nursery and where you live, just to avoid any issues with overheating. Temperature is still, this is still valid, but in the summer especially, you still need a day-night temperature differential. 10 to 15 degrees is fine. I get that with the grow lights, because the grow lights kind of give heat in the room, and then when they turn off, the temperatures come down a little bit. So crack a window if you need to, but your orchids still need to feel a different, like a little temperature drop at night that kind of mimics what they get in the wild. You don't want to have the same steady temperature all the time. You could, but it's not optimal for blooming. So with grow lights, that happens on its own. Even when you're growing on windowsills, that tends to happen because the light is warm, and then when the sun goes away, it cools down. So if you need to crack a window open at night, that will get the job done. Here in New York, it's humid. Yesterday it was like 65% humidity, and it was like 90 degrees. It was a little uncomfortable, but it gets even hotter. When it gets hotter, the humidity sometimes climbs even further here. So I don't use humidifiers this time of year. In the morning, I may still miss the collection to get any aerial roots for things that are overdue with repotting. But I don't run my humidifiers this time of year. Of course, depending on where you live, you might need to. So like if you live in like Las Vegas or something like that, like I know a lot of growers that grow indoors, you guys have central AC. It is dry, so you will still want to run your humidifiers. So it depends on where you live. But if you're growing indoors and your humidity is up, you're good. You don't really need your humidifiers anymore. But if you are in a dry climate, if you're like in Utah, Arizona, Nevada. I say Nevada, people say it's Nevada. Anyway, you would still watch your humidity. It's still good. It's still good to keep the humidity high. Remember, orchids are tropical plants and they do best when you can replicate the conditions that they get in the wild. Watering happens a lot more often this time of year. I'm watering like 2 to 3 times a week. I need to really pick it up. And remember, you don't water on a schedule. You want to water when you see that things need it, when things are approaching dryness. So you're not going to dry it. You're not going to water everything exactly 2 to 3 times a week. You want to see how it's doing. And again, it depends on your environment. It depends on the materials that you use. If you use clay pots, those dry out a lot faster. So those you'll need to keep up with watering more often. But watering picks up tremendously this time of year because it is so hot. Things are going to dry a lot faster. As I said, everything is in active growth at the moment, especially for my warm to hot growers. So I fertilize more closer to full strength this time of year because everything is in active growth. A lot of things start to bloom and bud this time of year as well. I notice in the spring and in the summer, I get a lot of blooms. So I like to feed more heavily this time of year. Anything that was in dormancy has already come out of dormancy at this point or is about to, like your catasetums, your dendrobiums should be pushing out new canes. So this is the time to feed and to water abundantly. And again, with orchids, you don't want to overwater them. You want to make sure that you are watering them thoroughly, but you want them to dry out. So you don't want to drown your orchids. Water thoroughly, drench them if you must. Careful with any Phalaenopsis orchids that you don't get water in the crown, but you water thoroughly, avoid the crowns, and let them drain and put them back. And then when they're dry or almost close to dry, for phals, I like to water as they're approaching dryness. Then you do the same thing again. So water thoroughly and abundantly, but let it drain and you will be in good shape. Repotting. So now is a great time to repot. In fact, the spring is the best time to repot, but if you're me, you're gonna be delayed as usual. I'm always behind with my repotting. But now's a great time because you have a lot of orchids in active growth. You can divide your orchids. The best time to repot is when you have new roots. So if you see new roots, you see new growths climbing out of the pot, it's a good time because those new roots are gonna adapt to the media that you're gonna put it in. So now's the time. You wanna do it before it starts cooling down, before the orchids stop growing. So in the next couple of months, the next 2-3 months, you wanna get everything done before it starts cooling down and before the orchids start slowing down. You wanna get them in that new media. They adapt, especially any new orchids. I don't repot orchids right away when I get them new anymore, just because I prefer to let them acclimate to my conditions. So like imagine they're in a nursery, lots of humidity, lots of light, and then they come to an apartment, especially say like in the fall or like winter, and it's like bone dry here in New York. So it kind of shocks them. So lately I don't repot right away. I wait for them to acclimate to my conditions a month or two, or till I see new roots coming in. But this time of year is when you see new roots coming in, so that's less of a worry getting everything to acclimate. So that's less of an issue. But now is a great time to get it done. Don't wait. Don't be me. Don't wait until September, October when things are starting to slow down. And again, it's acceptable to repot as long as you have new roots, even in the winter. But now is when you can attack your whole collection. One thing to point out that's important is that the summer is a prime time for a lot of pest issues, spider mites, thrips, mealybugs, that sort of thing. I at least notice it a lot more in the summer. So when things are growing, when it's hot, I mean, spider mites thrive when things are dry, but I notice it a lot in the summer. I've had thrips infestations in the summer, so you want to watch your orchids. You want to make sure you're treating your collection. If you see something, if you see pests, you want to make sure you nip it in the bud right away. I just find that this time of year is when I see thrips and things like that, so you want to be really careful. And also with the humidity up, you want to make sure you have air circulation going, because if it's too humid, that's where fungal infections can spread. That's where there could be other issues with the plants. So you want to make sure you have air cooling things down, especially now that it's hot. You don't want your orchids to overheat. If you're growing indoors, if you're growing like say Cattleyas and Dendrobium phalaenopsis love the heat, then you could probably get to 95, even 100 degrees and it's okay. But some orchids don't like it that hot. Like you want to keep it at 85, 90 degrees, but keep a fan going. You don't want anything to overheat. You don't want anything to be in stagnant air. So with those tips, your collection will thrive in the summer. So remember, just to recap, you want to give a little bit more light, but keep a day-night temperature differential. You want to water abundantly, but let things drain, let things dry. Don't overwater. Water abundantly and well, but let things drain. Fertilize heavily this time of year if your orchids are in active growth, and most are going to be in active growth. Keep airflow going. If you live in dry conditions, you can still use your humidifier, but if you are in a city that's more humid like mine, then you don't have to do that as much anymore. And make sure to get your repotting done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.